Can you beat the entire Arkham series without using a single takedown? I love the Arkham games and I love challenges, so why not combine the two by seeing if I can beat every Arkham game's main storyline without using a single attack that has the word takedown in its name. I completed every Arkham game separately, and here's a compilation of all my runs combined, starting off with Arkham Asylum. Hello everyone. I decided to challenge myself to beat Batman Arkham Asylum without using any takedowns. Here's a list of all the takedowns in this game. I can't use any of these attacks or I'll fail the challenge. I'll be going over gameplay first and then talk about other areas of difficulty during this run. Gameplay includes combat and Predator. Let's go over combat first. Combat just wasn't very challenging. Who needs takedowns to bash heads, break bones, and shatter spines? Batman sure doesn't. There are very few enemy types in Asylum, and they were all beatable without takedowns. Combat was easily possible without takedowns. Moving on. As you can probably imagine, Predator was extremely difficult without takedowns. Surprisingly, the most difficult Predator challenges were the ones at the beginning of the game. Batman only starts off with one gadget. Wait, just one gadget? What do you even need a utility belt for if you're just gonna carry around one gadget? The only attacks I could use against these thugs were glide kick, punch, and throw batarangs. It seemed like batarangs did absolutely no damage, which left me with punches, glide kicking, and hopes that should not be as high as they were. Both of these attacks were loud and would only knock down a thug, and since I didn't have the ground takedown, finishing them off was difficult to say the least. My first idea was to wait for the thug to get back up on his feet and then punch him some more until he was knocked out. This proved to be ineffective though, because by then the other enemies in the room had closed in on my location and started shooting at me. I couldn't get anywhere near these thugs because of the ridiculous knockback and stun duration when I got hit with a round of bullets. Look at this. Why are you just standing there, letting them shoot you instead of moving forward? This is why you bring more gadgets with you, Batman. After many deaths, I discovered an effective glide kicking mechanic. When gliding, if there are any other thugs around, they will be stunned for a certain amount of time. This would give me plenty of time to start a combo and ultimately finish off the enemies in the room. So after learning this mechanic, this is the strategy I used. I would glide kick one thug, then grapple away. This would hopefully alert the other enemies to his location. Once they were all grouped up, I would glide kick a second time. Any thugs within a close proximity of my glide kick would be stunned, so then I could just start a combo without having to worry about getting shot. All that was left for me to do was keep my combo by continually punching the thugs as they got up. Obviously, this is not an ideal way to take out enemies, but it worked nonetheless. Once I got the explosive gel though, it made Predator so much easier and a lot more bearable. The explosive gel can not only insta-take out thugs when placed on weak walls, it can also one-shot enemies if they are exploded off the walkways. This made the challenge a lot more fun than I imagined it would be. Watching no good criminals getting blown up and then falling to their untimely deaths was satisfying. Even the uncooperative enemies that just wouldn't fall off the walkway for whatever reason were not hard to deal with. The explosive gel does a certain amount of damage each hit and can KO opponents in 5 hits. It was kind of slow at points, but it was much easier than my glide kick strategy. Once I got the Batclaw though, Predator was a breeze. I was able to clear entire rooms in 1 or 2 minutes at max. You may be wondering, how did I take out so many thugs quickly just by using the Batclaw? Well, start the montage.
Man down, over here!
I may have broken Batman's no-killing rule more than a few times, But what can I say, Batman? Some challenges are just more important than your moral codes. Although Predator was extremely difficult and a huge pain to get through most of the time, it was possible without using a single takedown. Let's go over some of the other areas in the story that gave me trouble during this run. The first area I ran into that gave me trouble was the tutorial stealth mission. By the way, you'll see me mention multiple Predator sections even though I just talked about Predator. That's because some of the Predator sections were unique enough to discuss on their own. This area seemed to be impossible to complete without silent takedowns. Once you make one loud move, the thugs are alerted and will instantly start shooting at you. It's very hard to even get close to these thugs once they notice you, because, as mentioned before, the ridiculous knockback. After I died once, I tried skipping the thugs entirely instead of knocking them out. What do you know? It actually worked. Skipping through was not the answer to my problem that I was expecting, but I'm definitely not complaining. The next area that tried to ruin this run was saving Commissioner Gordon. In this area, if any thugs are alerted, Harley will shoot Gordon and you'll have to restart. The problem is, I can't use silent takedowns, so if I wanted to try and take out an enemy, I would immediately alert the other thugs and lose. I really thought this area was going to be the end of this challenge because I had no way of taking out these thugs. However, I might not have to. I tried getting to Harley by sneaking past these thugs instead of using a silent takedown on each of them. This area wasn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be for one simple reason. These thugs are practically blind. I was able to crouch behind the guardrail to get past this thug, even though the guardrail has many holes in it, and I was walking in his direct line of sight. Not 5 seconds later, we run into yet another example of an enemy that's as blind as a bat. Pun intended. I accidentally walked directly in front of him, yet he didn't even seem to realize or care that he's face to face with the freaking Batman. I thanked him for his incompetence and proceeded to go the much safer direction. I was able to make it up the stairs with no trouble, and I was feeling relieved that I got through that section without using a single takedown. Or so I thought. Once I was directly above Harley, I was greeted with this prompt. Yep. I said screw it and used my explosive gel instead, hoping it would work, and it ended up triggering the cutscene. I can't tell you how surprised I was that I was actually able to make it through this section without using a single takedown. I didn't run into anything worth mentioning until the insane prisoners. These guys were so annoying to put up with. Plus they freak me out. The game insisted more than a few times that I use the ground takedown on these guys, but I resisted and went to the trusty old punches to the face. Punches do so little damage to these enemies that I would sit there for a good 5 minutes, repeatedly hitting them, yet they were still somehow conscious. After seeing that punches didn't work, I tried out explosive gel. 5 explosive gel hits and they were knocked unconscious, same as the other thugs. Yes, it was tedious to continually place explosive gel on the floor every time I encountered one of these enemies, which was a lot, but it was the quickest way I could find to take them out without takedowns. For the remainder of the game, I never ran into any trouble. I was able to defeat Poison Ivy, stop the Joker, and regain control of Arkham Asylum without needing to use any takedowns. You know what that means. Batman Arkham Asylum is completely beatable without using a single takedown. Starting off as Bruce Wayne, we beat up Penguin and some thugs and we're on our way. We suit up, then go after Two-Face in the courthouse. Normally, I would silent take down this enemy, but punching seems to work just fine. After this thug is taken out, we drop down onto our first combat encounter. This wasn't anything complicated, just a few basic enemies that pose little to no threat. No takedowns necessary. After we defeat Two-Face, we go to the church where we are posed with our first real challenge, the tutorial stealth mission. This mission is meant to teach the player some of the different types of takedowns you can use in Predator, meaning the game really wants us to use them. These two thugs are no problem, I can just combo between them until they are both taken out. The two hostage takers will, unfortunately, not go down nearly as easily. Most of the attacks in my moveset like punching will not work against these enemies. Batman simply won't let me use them and says something along the lines of, if I do that, he'll kill the hostage. So, no takedowns, attacks like punching don't work. Well, what about gadgets? Batman starts off with just a few gadgets, and not a single one of them works against the hostage taker. And just like that, I was out of ideas. It seems like we're going to have to use 2 takedowns almost immediately after starting the game. Unless we switch to New Game Plus. This would give us access to all of Batman's gadgets and upgrades. I could jam the enemy's guns using the disruptor, which would mean the hostage is no longer in danger of getting shot. Then I could simply punch the enemies without any problems. So I switched over to New Game Plus, and not long after, I'm back here. I take out these 2 thugs without issue again, and then head over to the first hostage taker. I pull out my disruptor, expecting to be able to jam his gun. Then, I saw this. I'd rather not go into detail. Let's just say I was extremely frustrated, to say the least. For some idiotic reason, Batman has no disruptor ammo, and it does not charge up. Keep in mind that this issue is specific to this Predator room. This is the only point in the entire game where you start off a Predator encounter with 0 disruptor ammo. The bonus of being on New Game Plus is that I have access to all my other gadgets, so I did a little experimenting. There was still a lot of gadgets I couldn't use, but for some reason the sonic battering was not one of those. I was able to detonate it without any problems, which took out the thug. 1 down, 1 to go. I made my way to the other side of the room, and I noticed that the thug was standing right behind a weak wall. I could just place some explosive gel on the wall and blow it up, right? Right? Wrong. It only makes sense that Batman is willing to use explosives over there, but not over here. So now I'm stuck trying to get through this wall without using a takedown. Explosives don't work, so I tried punching the wall. Batman would still not allow me to punch. What about glide kicking? Based off of previous knowledge, I knew that you could in fact glide kick weak walls because some Riddler trophies require it. In this strategy, Batman actually starts the animation, which is something, but he makes a last-second decision to not break the wall and doesn't end up kicking it. Even if we could get through this wall, I don't think I would have been able to knock out this thug without a takedown. I already exploded 1 sonic battering and it doesn't recharge, so we sadly have to add 1 takedown to the list. Oh yeah, remember that I'm playing on New Game Plus now. Now we have to play on the hardest difficulty without using takedowns. This is going to be so much fun. We then make our way to the steel mill. After an easy combat fight, we run into our second encounter with armed goons. Thankfully, we have the disruptor ammo now, so we can just disable 2 of the enemy's weapons. The one last guy, who is still armed, was easily taken down with the sonic battering. I don't know if this is a bug, or I just have short-term memory loss, but I don't ever recall seeing a thug here, watching me beat up his buddies through the window. Either way, we get past him and we are now faced with our first real Predator map. I have to tell you, the Batclaw is nothing short of a godsend in this game. I used my smoke bomb here, then Batclawed these 2 enemies over the railings. I tried to finish this enemy off with punches, but there just wasn't enough time to knock him out before my smoke ran out. I was able to Batclaw these 2 thugs over the railings, leaving just 2 more thugs. I jammed both of their guns using the disruptor, and it was smooth sailing from there. Next up is the Mr. Hammer boss fight. I lost a large portion of my health due to enemies doing much more damage on New Game Plus, even though I only got hit a few times. We survived though, and now we can go find Mr. Freeze. Getting into the old GCPD building would have been challenging without takedowns, but we can skip through all these armed thugs. I was doing just fine in this Predator encounter and was able to take out multiple enemies without taking any damage. That was until I was spotted here, and tried to escape into the grates. They unfortunately saw me go into the grates, and I started getting shot. These enemies absolutely melted my health bar, and I was barely able to escape with 1 HP. While I was grappling around the gargoyles trying to get out of sight, this thug decided to destroy the gargoyle that I'm currently grappling to. I fell right next to a mine. This mine would have been enough to kill me, and probably my controller too due to sheer frustration, but luckily for my sake, I'm just barely out of range. It doesn't even matter though, because not too long after I got spotted. Just one bullet was enough to kill me. On my next try, I was much more cautious, and was able to walk away completely unscathed. Next, we head over to the museum to fight Penguin. This video is starting to drag on a little, so I'm going to speed things up a lot more. The Penguin section of the game was, to my surprise, fairly easy. The combat maps aren't that difficult, punches and counters work just fine. Predator was also easy. The rooms didn't have many enemies, had plenty of walkways, and was extremely open in terms of movement. As long as I was somewhat cautious, I could get through Predator maps quickly and easily, despite being on New Game Plus without the use of takedowns. Thankfully, there wasn't a single area outside of Predator in combat that even encouraged the use of a takedown, much less require one. So, although he was annoying, Penguin was easily beaten without the use of takedowns. Next up is Raish. Again, I was able to make it through this section with little to no issue. Sure, the ninjas were a little annoying without the use of instant takedowns, or the counter icons above their heads, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. Now, we head back over to the old GCPD building, where we were finally met with something challenging. The Mr. Freeze boss fight. You are required to use 10 attacks to beat Mr. Freeze on New Game Plus, and there's a total of 12 different attacks you can use on Mr. Freeze. Unfortunately for me, 5 of the total 12 attacks are considered takedowns. That leaves me with 7 different attacks to use against Mr. Freeze, and he does everything in his power to stop me from using an attack more than once. What did I do? I used every single attack I could that didn't count as a takedown. Here's a list of all the attacks I used against Mr. Freeze. After I'd used all 7 of these attacks, I then went about exploring the room. I found out that placing explosive gel on these glass ceilings actually deal damage against Mr. Freeze, which was something I didn't know. This was one more way to damage Mr. Freeze, leaving me with just 2 more attacks I needed to use in order to beat Mr. Freeze. Unfortunately for me, there was absolutely nothing left for me to work with in the environment. By now, Mr. Freeze has already frozen everything in the room, and I had used all of my gadgets. I must have sat there at least for an hour, replaying the fight over and over and over again until I realized that I was getting nowhere. I had no way of damaging Mr. Freeze those last 2 times without takedowns, so it seemed as if I was going to have to use 2 takedowns to finish him off. That's exactly what I did. I used 2 takedowns to finish the boss fight. I paused the game right after the cutscene and took a break from playing. I was not satisfied with this result though. I was determined to beat Mr. Freeze on New Game Plus without using any takedowns. So, when I came back, I tried restarting from this screen. Luckily, it put me right back at the start of the boss fight. I spent over an hour off camera experimenting with Mr. Freeze's AI and developing a strategy to beat him without takedowns. While playing off camera, I discovered one very helpful mechanic that was going to help me achieve my goal. If you distract Mr. Freeze while he's freezing something in the environment, you can actually direct his attention onto you and away from what he's doing. An example of this is the ledges. By distracting Mr. Freeze while he tries to freeze the ledges, he'll stop what he's doing and decide to attack you instead. This leaves you open to use the ledges a second time and get in an extra attack on Mr. Freeze. Keep in mind that you have to do these attacks quickly because the second Mr. Freeze isn't distracted by you, he'll turn his attention to freezing the environment again. So, how do you distract Mr. Freeze? Well, there's 2 ways to do this. The more obvious solution is to get in his line of sight. It's risky, but it will turn Mr. Freeze's attention onto you, leaving you open to get in another attack. Another way you can distract Mr. Freeze is by using the Nora statues. By destroying one of the many Nora statues scattered across the map, Mr. Freeze will stop what he's doing and go examine the destroyed Nora statue. So, I put these mechanics into play and created a path to try and defeat Mr. Freeze on New Game Plus without takedowns. Immediately after the cutscene, I used the retgun on this generator to damage Mr. Freeze. While he was recovering, I quickly ran over to prep this weak wall with explosive gel. I waited for him to walk in front of the weak wall, then exploded it. After doing the beatdown, I waited for Mr. Freeze to get back up on his feet. I tried using the disruptor, but I struggled a little. Regardless, I was still able to disrupt Mr. Freeze's gun without taking any damage. I then ran away to prep this glass ceiling with explosive gel. I led Mr. Freeze under the glass and used my explosive gel. At this point, I had damaged Mr. Freeze 4 times, 6 more to go. I tried using the line launcher, but things didn't go as planned, as you can see. I ran away as quickly as possible to avoid taking any more damage and headed straight for the ledge. Mr. Freeze was in the perfect position for me to use a drop attack. Now, here's where things get interesting. I grappled back up to the ledge where I prepped my batarang. I then threw it at the Nora statue. I think I threw it a bit too early because Mr. Freeze didn't react at all. However, he was distracted by it the second time I destroyed a statue, and I was able to get in a second drop attack. Now, I grappled back up to the ledge again while Mr. Freeze was still recovering. Now I used my other strategy to distract Mr. Freeze. I threw multiple batarangs at him to try to get his attention, and he eventually saw me. Mr. Freeze was distracted by this and tried making his way up the stairs towards me. I stopped him from getting any further by drop attacking him for the 3rd time in a row. I repeated the exact same thing I just did previously, but this time I unfortunately missed my drop attack. Mr. Freeze was able to freeze the ledges, and that was the end of that strategy. Despite missing that last drop attack, I was still able to get in 3 drop attacks, which was exactly what I needed. Now, I just had to damage him 3 more times, and I still had a good amount of attacks and gadgets. I tried using the grapnel boost and transition into a glide attack, but I failed miserably and was spotted by Mr. Freeze. I escaped and attempted to glide a kick again, this time being successful. Now I only needed 2 more attacks. I was able to get in yet another drop attack by using the line launcher, and I just needed to use 1 more attack. I went over to the corner of the room and prepped this weak wall with explosive gel. By using my distraction technique yet again, I was able to keep Mr. Freeze's attention on me long enough to explode this weak wall. This hit was enough to finish him off, and with that, I had successfully beaten Mr. Freeze without using takedowns. I can't tell you how proud I am of completing this task. The Mr. Freeze boss fight is no doubt one of the most fun boss fights in the Arkham series, but after my first couple of playthroughs, it got way too easy. The addition of not being able to use takedowns really added the challenge back to this boss fight and made it much more enjoyable. I would highly recommend trying this out for yourself the next time you play Arkham City on New Game Plus. No serious troubles arose on my mission to retrieve the cure from Joker at the steel mill. The Predator in combat was getting pretty difficult, but nothing that caused that many problems. The only real challenge was this Predator room, but I was able to clear it without too much trouble. Now, we have to stop Protocol 10. By now, there are many enemies that are extremely strong, have intelligent AI, and are armored. I didn't run into anything difficult until I got to this area. I died multiple times in this Predator room. This room is already pretty small compared to some of the other Predator rooms in this game, and when you fill it up with a ton of enemies and mines that are scattered everywhere, you've got yourself a pretty tough challenge. I simply had to be extremely patient and wait for an enemy to isolate himself from the others. As long as he was in a decent position to be backclawed over a ledge, I was able to take each one of them out individually. Once I had eventually cleared out the majority of the room, taking out the last 3 enemies was easy. Nothing significant happened on my journey up Wonder Tower. Once we get up to Wonder Tower, we have this Predator room. This was one of the areas I was really worried about going into this challenge because of how this room is designed. But it ended up being one of, if not the easiest Predator rooms I faced during this playthrough. I just used the remote batarang to continually knock off every Tiger Guard who thought climbing this ladder was a good idea. And that's the end of Protocol 10. Moving on to the next section of the game, defeating Clayface and stopping the Joker. Before being able to get into the movie theater, you first have to take out all of these snipers on guard. In a normal playthrough, I would have easily been able to silent take down each and every single one of these snipers. Without the luxury of silent takedowns, I had to find a different way. Any loud move I made would result in many scopes pointing in my direction, all ready to shoot and kill me. Thanks to speedrunning techniques, I knew that you could use the Batclaw to disarm these snipers. These goons can't pick up their weapons after being disarmed because the guns fall off the roofs. Another great thing about this strategy is it doesn't alert any other snipers. Since the enemies can no longer shoot me, they choose to verbally assault me instead.
Chicken again! Chicken! Hey! You chicken man or Batman?
It's annoying to be called chicken every 2 freaking seconds, but it's much better than getting shot and killed. Next up is Clayface. The first 2 stages of this boss fight don't involve takedowns, so they were no trouble at all. The final stage is a combat challenge, but takedowns aren't needed. Again, punches and counters are still effective, so Clayface was defeated without the use of takedowns. And that's the end of the run. So, can you beat Batman Arkham City without using takedowns? Well, the answer is no, you can't. You are required to use at least 1 takedown on New Game Plus, and 2 takedowns in normal mode. It is possible to beat Batman Arkham City without using takedowns. This is a follow-up video to my original Batman Arkham City run without takedowns. If you haven't seen that video out already, go check it out right now and come back here after you watch it. So, assuming all of you have already seen that run, you know that I was completely stumped by this Predator room. While I did run into multiple areas that were challenging during my run, this tutorial stealth mission was the only area that forced me to use a takedown. Notice how I said takedown, not takedowns as in plural. That's because I was able to punch these 2 thugs unconscious, then found a workaround to this hostage taker by using the sonic battering. That left me with 1 more hostage taker to deal with. And, unfortunately, I found this hostage taker to be an unavoidable takedown, which added the one and only takedown to the takedown counter. However, just a few days ago, Jason Todd 135 pointed out to me that there is in fact a way to avoid using a takedown here. It does include the use of a glitch though. I never really went over if glitches are considered breaking the rules of the challenge or not, but I've come to the conclusion that minor glitches and skips are okay to use, just no major glitches or skips. I'll probably have a paragraph in the description or in a pinned comment going into detail about my decision, so read that if you're interested. This specific glitch was found just a few days ago by 30 Puns, and it allowed the player to skip through this tutorial stealth mission. Well, how do you use this glitch? First, we have to get the storage because it is in fact a zip. Simply get into a corner cover position while facing south, then pull out some type of battering, and now you have storage. Now make your way to the church. Upon entering, use your line launcher in this diagonal position. Then make your way to the edge of the tightrope. Keep in mind that you have to be extremely precise as to where you position yourself on the tightrope, because this will be where we use the zip. Now that we're in the correct position, we're ready to use the zip. Fire the rec gun, and immediately pull out and use your explosive gel. If you were quick enough, then Batman should be in this glitched position. Now we have to use our storage. Simply pull out the battering you used to get storage, and Batman will get into this corner cover position. Now we can use the freeze grenade. This will glitch Batman into the wall, allowing us to walk through it and get to the other side. After walking through this wall, look where we are! We basically made it through this door without actually using the door. Now we can climb to the top of the church and eventually get to the bell tower. So, basically, we can skip through the tutorial stealth mission entirely, meaning we don't have to use a takedown. You know what that means. You can beat Batman Arkham City without using any takedowns. We start off the game at Blackgate. This section of the game consists of chasing down Black Mask, but never being able to catch up to him due to these thugs constantly getting in our way. These combat fights act as more of a tutorial, meaning we can get by them quite easily without using takedowns. Once we get up to the roof of Blackgate, we run into the very first of Black Mask's assassins. The Killer Croc boss fight involves cape stunning, punching, button mashing, and repeat, so no takedowns necessary, and that's the end of Blackgate for a while. We then go back to the Batcave, learn about Black Mask's 8 assassins, and use our Batwing auto-nav system. The auto-nav system is jammed, so we must go down to the control tower and check it out. This is where I ran into the very first challenge this run had to offer, the tutorial stealth mission. There's a total of 4 armed thugs in this room, and 2 of which are hostage takers. If you watched my Arkham City run, you already know that these types of rooms really want you to use takedowns. In fact, they go to great lengths to keep you from using anything but takedowns. The use of punches, cape stuns, and any other attack you can think of is strictly prohibited against hostage takers like this guy. And, as if that's not enough, none of the gadgets Batman starts off with work against this thug either. You can't skip past him either, the vent won't open until after you've taken this thug out. So it seems as if we've already run into an unavoidable takedown almost immediately after starting the run. However, I was fully prepared to take on a roadblock like this. I had a New Game Plus save ready to go. Playing on New Game Plus would give me access to all of Batman's gadgets, not just the base gadgets. I already know that the Disruptor works against hostage takers, so I could just disable their weapons and attack freely. So I booted up my New Game Plus save and got to this point. I was ready to pull out the Disruptor and use it against the hostage taker, but as you can see, things didn't go as planned. For some reason, the Disruptor is completely missing from Batman's arsenal. I have absolutely no idea why WB decided to entirely remove the Disruptor from Batman's belt during this tutorial. Do you know what this means though? WB seems to have followed the exact same do's and don'ts that Rocksteady implemented into the Arkham City tutorial stealth mission. No attacks allowed other than takedowns, almost none of the gadgets work, and the Disruptor ammo, or in this case the Disruptor entirely, is completely removed from Batman's arsenal. In my Arkham City run, there was one oddball gadget that was actually effective against the hostage taker. That gadget was the Sonic Shock Batarang. So, in theory, that same gadget would also work here. The only problem was unlocking the Sonic Shock Batarang. In order to use this gadget, you first have to unlock it by achieving rank 10 in the Dark Knight challenges. Easier said than done. Since I'm an idiot and didn't think to unlock the Sonic Shock Batarang, that meant I was going to have to play through normal mode again. Did that sound like I meant just once? Well, no, I had to play through the story a total of 5 times before I finally unlocked the gadget, which added up to about 15 hours of gameplay. All just to get this one gadget and eliminate a takedown. You may be wondering why on earth it took me 5 playthroughs to get rank 10 in the Dark Knight challenges. Well, to my knowledge, the Dark Knight challenges are meant to be completed throughout normal mode, New Game Plus, and I Am the Knight. Since I was trying to do 2/3 of the Dark Knight Predator challenges in just normal mode, this proved to be nearly impossible. I had to plan out every Predator room and how I would get through each individual stage of the Dark Knight challenges. Since there are a very limited amount of Predator rooms in Origins, I had to get through at least one stage in almost every single Predator encounter I faced. Now that might seem easy to you, but given how bugged the Dark Knight challenge system seemed to be, this was more difficult than you probably think. More than a few times I would clearly complete a stage, but the buggy game refused to accept the fact that I had finished the challenge, and there was no restarting or redoing the Predator map, since the game would save immediately after you finish. This meant that I would no longer have enough Predator maps ahead to achieve rank 10, resulting in me having to restart the game entirely and try again. On my 5th playthrough, all the stars aligned and I was barely able to get to rank 10 and unlock the Sonic Batarang. I could make an entire video on this topic, but I hope you can do with that summary, even though it doesn't do all my time, dedication, and struggles justice. About 2 weeks later, I was finally able to get to this area with the Sonic Batarang unlocked. Luckily, the Sonic Shock Batarang was the only non-base gadget in my arsenal. All the other gadgets I unlocked during my normal run were missing. This was the moment of truth. Would the Sonic Shock Batarang take out the hostage taker and prove my theory right? Or was all my time and dedication towards unlocking this gadget a complete waste of time? Well, let me tell you. The Sonic Shock Batarang does work against the hostage taker. However, right before you shock him unconscious, he gets a shot off. This shot kills the hostage, and you have to restart. So in other words, the hours and hours I spent trying to unlock this gadget were completely in vain. Or were they? Maybe it wouldn't work in the way I imagined it would, but the gadget might still prove useful. If you hold off on dropping smoke in this position, the enemies will open fire on you. As soon as they open fire, the game gives you the ability to move around. You can also use the remote battering in this position, but none of the other base gadgets work. Since the remote battering does no damage and only knocks down these enemies for a brief time, I dismissed this strategy entirely. Now that I had the sonic shock battering though, things might go differently. Thankfully, the sonic shock battering is one of the few gadgets that does work in this position, meaning you can take out one of these two thugs shooting at you. I dropped the smoke bomb and grappled up. The one remaining thug that had been shooting at me ran to get into his position. I was then forced to use one inverted takedown on this hostage taker, then move on. Normally you're supposed to vent take down the second enemy, but I was able to just open up the vent and beat down him. Now here's where that sonic battering I used earlier came into play. This hostage taker separated by a weak wall would normally be an unavoidable takedown. I can't punch the wall, nor explode it since that would harm the hostage. And Batman won't let me do anything that could harm the hostage, making this wall seemingly impossible to get through without using a takedown. Since I took that thug out earlier with the sonic shock battering, there is now no hostage taker in this position. I was able to use my explosive gel to open up the wall, and it seems as if I was able to avoid using a takedown here. But now we have another problem on our hands. I can't get over this little ledge. I tried climbing over it, as well as diving over it, but neither of those worked. My guess is that WB never accounted for someone like me to find a way to open up this wall using explosive gel instead of a takedown. So, even though it's clearly open, the game hasn't registered that I opened this wall because I haven't used a takedown yet. I was not about to give up though. What if I was able to take out both thugs in this position instead of just one? This would mean that the fight would end as soon as I take out this enemy, which would reset the game. Then I should be able to climb over the ledge without issue. The only problem is finding a way to knock this second thug out. After I take out this first thug with the sonic battering, I can do three things. Use my smoke bomb, use the remote battering, and move around this little platform. None of which help me knock out this thug. The only way to gain access to unrestricted movement is to grapple up to this gargoyle and listen to Batman's long dialogue sequence. This gives the thug plenty of time to run away, even after knocking him down with a remote battering and throwing smoke at him. So, to my knowledge, there is no way to take both of these enemies out before they get into position. My next strategy was just an attempt at changing up some variables. I had absolutely no reason to believe this would somehow work, but what if I were to leave this second thug conscious instead of knocking him out? So, instead of using a beatdown on this enemy, I ultra keep stunned him and left him there. I then attempted to get over this wall after using the explosive gel, and it actually worked! For some reason, leaving this thug alive allowed me to climb over this ledge and avoid a seemingly required takedown. I have no idea how or why this worked. Arkham Origins coding is truly a mystery. Now all that's left in the room is this one last thug, who was easily taken out with a beatdown. So I was able to make it through this section after using one takedown on this hostage taker. I'm proud to say that I found a way to avoid using a takedown in an area that was coded to force the player to use a takedown. I would have liked to have found a way to avoid using an inverted takedown here as well, but I don't think that's possible. So we have to add one takedown to the takedown counter. Finally, moving on with the story, we have to track down Penguin and interrogate him. Tracking down Penguin wasn't that bad. The few combat encounters were fairly easy. There was one Predator encounter, but it was just 3 enemies, so nothing difficult at all. This was also where I noticed that I still didn't have any of my gadgets that I unlocked through normal mode, and I remembered that those don't carry over to New Game Plus and Origins. This will make my run a lot more difficult moving forward. Once we track down Penguin, we head to a ship to interrogate him. To get to Penguin though, we first have to get inside the ship, where multiple armed thugs are guarding the door. I simply used a beatdown on both snipers, and to my surprise, it didn't alert any of the other thugs. I was able to take out the remaining enemies by pulling them over the ledges with the bat claw, and now we can head into the ship. Nothing noteworthy really happened in the ship at first, just a few basic enemies scattered around here and there. But then I started running into some rather large combat encounters. Since I'm on New Game Plus, there were a lot of different enemy types that normally wouldn't be introduced until much later into the story. These thugs also don't have the counter icons above their heads, making combat more difficult than normal. Even with these added difficulties though, I was able to get past these combat encounters without much trouble because I have a lot of experience with the Arkham combat. Now look, I'm not saying I flawlessly bypassed these combat encounters with ease. I did make some mistakes, but I could afford to since I had maxed out armor. I also ran into the first real Predator encounter along the way, but it wasn't difficult at all. I simply camped on this little structure and pulled each and every single enemy over the ledges with the bat claw. We can then finally get to the Penguin, interrogate him, and Deathstroke. I can't use the special combo takedown on Deathstroke, nor do the counter icons show up above his head. This may sound challenging at first, but it wasn't. The special combo takedown is far from required, resulting in a little damage that can easily be made up through punching. And I'm pretty good at timing the counters out against Deathstroke, so I was able to defeat him with ease, without taking any damage at that. After defeating Deathstroke, we gain access to the remote claw, which is going to make Predator a lot easier down the line. In the next section of the game, we have to infiltrate the GCPD and solve the Lacey Towers case. But first we have to get inside the GCPD, where there are multiple police officers, including snipers, on guard. I simply used a beatdown on both snipers to take them out. Many punches later, I had knocked out the remaining thugs, and I was able to continue on with the story. Now that I'm inside the GCPD, let's talk about this area as a whole. If I'm being honest, the combat wasn't that hard. Like I said earlier, I'm pretty good at combat and have max armor, so these officers stood no chance. There was also a Predator map in this section. The remote claw is an extremely helpful tool in Predator, being able to take out up to 3 enemies using the gargoyles, and then some more if you use the propane tanks. But it didn't solve all the problems Predator rooms threw at me. The main one being that the remote claw can't string armored thugs onto gargoyles. So my strategy was to try and take out most of the regular thugs using the remote claw, then either beat down or black claw the remaining armored enemies, which seemed to work okay. Outside of Predator in combat, there were 2 areas that I want to discuss. The first of which being this area where the cop is interrogating Loose Lips. I didn't know this, but you can just dive through the window and take out the cop normally instead of using a takedown, so no need to use a takedown there. The second area I want to mention is in the GCPD sewers. I just thought that I should say here that I don't count this move as a takedown. Although it sure looks like a takedown, it's not on the skill tree or a prompt, so it's not a takedown. So we can get through the GCPD section of the game without using any takedowns. Now that we've solved the Lacey Towers case and discovered the Joker, we now make our way to the bank. After confronting the Joker, we're faced with another Predator map. I just picked off each enemy one by one with my gadgets until they were all taken out. After we finish that Predator map, we have to head over to the Steel Mill. Again, some more combat and Predator, but I've got the hang of both of those by now. Even though my gadgets are kind of limited on these outside Predator maps, I've found an effective strategy to take these enemies out. Simply camp the ladders and place explosive gel to knock every enemy off that tries to climb up. It's an instant knockout, and alerts everyone else to his position, meaning you can repeat the same strategy over and over again. At the end of the Steel Mill section, we have the Copperhead boss fight. This boss was so annoying. It's already extremely difficult to judge when she's going to attack, and take away her counter icons, it's just that much more difficult. Now take away blade dodge takedowns and special combo takedowns, adding to the already difficult challenge ahead. Thanks to my maxed out armor again, I was still able to survive with a good amount of health left despite my poor gameplay. And that's the end of the Steel Mill. Now we have to track down Joker at the hotel. Gameplay wise, the hotel section of the game was pretty difficult. The enemies seemed to be getting stronger, quicker, and smarter in both combat and Predator. Not to mention the obvious increase of these enemies as well. Regardless, I was able to make it through both combat and Predator with little to no issue. One Predator map I was really worried about was this encounter. Bane's men will arm proximity mines in the gargoyles after you take out a few thugs. That means I can't use the gargoyles or takedowns. Practically flawless gameplay resulted in me getting through this section on my first try, even though I kinda just winged it. I'll probably post this entire Predator encounter on my Shorts channel because it was just that good. Yes, I do have a second channel called Arkham Nerd Shorts where I post clips. You should check it out. So moving on, I was able to make it all the way up to the top of the hotel without using any takedowns. Then I ran into Bane. Or more accurately, Bane ran into me. The first stage of this boss fight is easy. Bane doesn't have his Venom active, so I can just repeatedly beat down him to do damage. The second stage poses much more of a threat because Bane activates his Venom. In his Venom state, Bane takes 0 damage from any attack, and the only way to deactivate his Venom is to use the special combo Takedown. Or so it seems. After 3 beatdowns on Bane, you'll have charged up your shock gloves fully. While Batman's shock gloves are active, he'll finish his beatdowns by deactivating Bane's Venom instead of kicking him in the face. That means that we can cut off Bane from his Venom, get him back to his normal state, and start dealing damage again without using any takedowns. The third and final stage of this boss fight is basically the second stage, just much harder. Bane now has a few different attacks and mechanics in his arsenal, and now there are also multiple thugs attacking me. I simply had to charge up and use my shock gloves to cut off Bane from his Venom, then I was able to attack and deal damage freely. So I was able to make it past Bane and the entire hotel section of the game without using a single takedown. The next big section of the game is Firefly's sequence. Combat I've already gone over a lot. Punching, countering, and beatdowns were effective enough to get by any encounters without using takedowns. I've also gone over Predator a lot throughout this video, but I want to go over it one last time since I now have most of my gadgets available. I usually use my remote claw ammo to instantly knock out 3 enemies. Then I use my sonic shock battering and maybe backclaw 1 or 2 enemies over the ledges. Then I disrupt the remaining enemies' weapons and punch them unconscious. And that's how I dealt with Predator maps without using takedowns now that I had access to all my gadgets. The Firefly boss fight itself was honestly extremely easy and has nothing to do with takedowns in the slightest, so I was able to disarm the bombs and defeat Firefly without using any takedowns. The last and most difficult section of the game, we head back to Blackgate to stop the riot. Once we get into Blackgate, we run into this Predator map. Using the exact same strategy I used in the Firefly section, as well as using a little bit of my ladder camping strategy, I got through this section with ease. Now that the last Predator encounter of the game was taken care of, let's move on to finding the Joker. The next few areas this game had in store for me were combat sections. Remember how I said earlier I was getting the hang of combat? Well, I was going absolutely nuts, flawlessing a majority of these combat sections, including this giant encounter with a crazy amount of enemies. After we get through the combat fights, we get to this area. Joker and Bane have teamed up to try and make Batman break his moral code. That means we have to fight Bane and, well, stop his heart before the electric chair fully charges. The first stage of this fight is, for the most part, a copy-paste from the hotel boss fight with Bane, but does have a few noticeable differences to it. For starters, Bane doesn't have a Venom state at this stage. However, even though Bane's Venom isn't active, the only way I can deal damage to him is by using this attack. So that means I had to wait for my shock gloves to charge up and then use a beatdown in order to deal any damage to Bane. The second stage was much easier, mainly because the shock gloves are always active no matter what. So after I finished the first and second stages, Bane decides it's a good idea to inject himself with a compound even more powerful than Venom. So now we have to defeat TN1 Bane. This absolute monster of a man is ridiculously powerful, so much so that the game wants the player to stay out of sight, sneak up on Bane, and use takedowns to get in damage. I've already learned that playing the game the wrong way is not a good idea, but I tried it out anyway. I went into a full-out brawl with TN1 Bane. If you try punching Bane, he'll counter and punch you instead, so no non-takedown attacks work. What about gadgets? Well, Bane completely ignores most of Batman's gadgets, and they just bounce off of him as if they were toys. There are also a few gadgets that Bane can actually counter as well. Say you try using the Batclaw, Bane will pull you in and then slam you. So after getting punched around like a dummy for a good 20 minutes, I discovered that the only way to damage TN1 Bane is to, sadly, use takedowns. Don't get too discouraged though, because I still have control over how many takedowns I use. After some more experimenting, I found out that it takes a total of 9 takedowns to beat TN1 Bane. However, we can lower that number by using the electric walls. Now, slamming Bane into the electric wall does count as another takedown, but in the end it yields more damage. So we're essentially getting the damage of 3 takedowns for the price of 2. That means that we can beat TN1 Bane using just 6 takedowns with this strategy. But I'm not done yet. Turns out there's a few vents and grates that are positioned in the perfect spot to automatically launch Bane into the electric wall. We never got a second takedown prompt, so therefore Batman slamming Bane into the electric wall was technically part of the original takedown we used. That means that we can use the electric walls without using a second takedown. Lots of manipulation later, I was able to use these silent takedowns from the grates to push Bane into the electric walls. After doing this 3 times, Bane was defeated. So I was able to lower the amount of takedowns needed to just 3. Now we can continue on with the story after adding 3 more takedowns to the takedown counter. That may sound like a lot, but I was going into this boss fight thinking I was going to need many more takedowns than that. So beating Bane using just 3 takedowns made me feel very accomplished. Now all that's left to do is defeat a few more thugs with Gordon, beat up Joker in the chapel, and then the run's over. That means that I was able to beat Batman Arkham Origins using a total of just 4 takedowns. After the really long intro scene, we then take control of Batman and the run begins. We have a quick chat with our buddy Jim Gordon, and then head off to save the cop. Just like in my other runs, pure punching and countering is a completely viable strategy, meaning I don't really have to worry about using takedowns in combat. So we beat up the thugs, save the cop, and then we get, you guessed it, the Batmobile. Since takedowns and the Batmobile have literally 0 correlation in this game, that means the Batmobile has no significance in this run at all. Trust me, that's a huge relief, because that's practically half the game right there that I don't even have to worry about takedowns. Plus, I won't have to talk about it too much during this video either. We then save Ivy in the safe house, power up the satellite, and arrive at the first challenging part of this run, the tutorial stealth mission. God, I hate these. The first 2 thugs go down with ease. You can lure them out with a batarang, then use a beatdown to finish them off. The last 3 thugs are where the challenge comes in. We just got our new suit, and the game really wants to teach us that brand new fear takedown mechanic. First off, you can't skip these thugs. You have to take them out before continuing on with the story. And, well, that means you have to somehow get out of the grates to take these guys out. The game doesn't give us the option to just open the grate, which means there's literally no other option than to use a fear takedown. Now, you're probably thinking I could just wait for the fear takedown to end, so I don't have to use any more takedowns. But no, waiting just means the hostage gets killed, and we have to restart. So the only thing we can do is chain a fear takedown on all 3 of these enemies. Since I got a takedown prompt every single time, that means we have to add 3 takedowns to the takedown counter. Keep in mind that this was just the tutorial. After connecting to the satellite and finding Scarecrow's location, I then headed to Ace Chemicals to confront him. Right off the bat, I ran into an outside Predator map. These are usually quite easy, but can get really tricky when you can't use takedowns. That's mainly because of how small these maps are. First off, there's not much room for you to move around. To add to this, the thugs are almost always next to each other and in groups, and since I can't use silent takedowns, it's tricky to take these thugs out safely. I put my smoke bomb to good use, and for the most part just relied on punching to take these guys out. It sure wasn't pretty, but it got the job done, meaning we can move on to saving the workers. Most of these are just combat fights filled with pretty basic enemies. That means I could purely rely on punching and countering, along with an occasional batarang, which is an extremely effective strategy that doesn't involve takedowns at all. After saving the workers, I dove deeper into Ace Chemicals and ran into a fairly large combat encounter. I handled this how Batman really would, taking all the thugs out before they even knew what hit them. All that remained between me and Scarecrow now was a stealth section. Now, this was my first real Predator room. Unlike the other games, the Batclaw can't pull enemies off ledges in this game. I had relied so much on the Batclaw in my other Arkham No Takedowns runs, but that just wasn't an option anymore. You'd think that would open up my approach to be more creative and use the other gadgets in my arsenal to their full potential, but no. Why be smart and creative when you can mindlessly throw punches? Yes, a new mechanic added to this game is being able to punch enemies while they're on the ground. Since I can't use the ground takedown, this new mechanic was definitely a good replacement option for me. So all I did was target a thug all by himself and then proceed to bash his body into the floor until he wasn't breathing anymore. Long story short, Scarecrow gets away, Barbara gets kidnapped, and I now have to go to the clock tower with Gordon to look for clues. There was a group of armed militia outside waiting for me, and little did they know they were about to be brutally murdered. My strategy of just beating the life out of everyone was great, sure, but was it the best? So I decided to combine my old strategy with explosive gel. The addition of bombs definitely did not disappoint. Anyways, I now had to track down Oracle. This involved a lot of Batmobile scanning, and yes, another Predator map somewhere along the way. I tried taking them all on at once, but that apparently wasn't going to work this time, and I instantly got overwhelmed. That meant I had to take a more stealthy approach, if you can even call this stealthy. So I had to wait for the thugs to split up, and then I could beat them up individually. Also, I have no idea what happened here, but I hit this thug with a flying kick, right? I came back later after the fight, and his body was nowhere to be found, so I would assume that I just sent a dude flying off a 10-story balcony. But, you know, he's not dead because Batman doesn't kill. Okay, so we found the Arkham Knight's secret tunnel network, which the only thing really worth mentioning here was this combat fight. I'll admit, it gave me way more trouble than it should have, but I got through it nevertheless. After that, I was on my way to Penguin's weapons cache. After meeting up with Nightwing, he gave me the Disruptor, which will definitely help with Predator sections moving forward. I then headed down to take out the enemies around the van. Batman once again shows how brutal he is by first lodging this dude's neck into a metal fence, and then by throwing another guy into a car. I followed the van back to Penguin's hideout, and were met again with another Predator map. I call it a Predator map, but really this felt more like combat than anything. I camped up on this platform and just punched every enemy that climbed up the ladders. Now we head inside. I was so worried that this prompt was going to say takedown, but thankfully it says interrogate instead. After the interrogation, I was faced with a dual combat fight with Nightwing. Once the bar to switch characters charges up fully, the only way you can switch characters in the middle of a fight is to use a dual takedown. That meant all I had to do throughout the fight was not change characters, and I was able to take out all the thugs with ease. Next up, I headed off to Stag airships to try and capture Scarecrow. Before entering Stag airships, I first picked up the remote hacking device at Wayne Tower. Once I was inside the airship, I ran into some combat and Predator encounters that were getting more difficult than before. Regardless, I absolutely killed it in combat, beating every single encounter flawlessly. As for Predator, there were two sections on the airships. The first one was really easy. I just waited at the top of this ladder and knocked out every thug when they climbed up. The second Predator room introduced the minigunner enemy, which would make things much more difficult for me. I lured a group of thugs together on one side of the room, then used a smoke bomb so I could take them out with my fists. Then I quickly made my way to the other side of the room, beat up those thugs, then took out the minigunner last. At the end of Stag airships, we confront Scarecrow. And guess what? Another takedown prompt is thrown right in my face. Again, this is another scripted scenario where you can't do anything but use a takedown. So that's one more takedown added to the counter, meaning we're already at 4. Oh yeah, and Scarecrow escapes again. He tends to do that a lot this game. Moving on, Oracle dies. We recruit Poison Ivy to Team Batman, and we're on a mission to take out the malicious defenses on Founders Island so we can start scanning for the Cloudburst. The 2 radar towers are easily destroyed, leaving just the long-range missile launcher, which is protected by a lot of armed militia. I put my gadgets to good use to take out thugs in groups, and the remaining enemies who were all split up went down via fists to the face. After taking out all the thugs, we head inside to the control room where Batman hides in the vent before being confronted by the Arkham Knight. And guess what? The only way to get out of this vent is to use a fear takedown. Trust me, I tried my best to avoid a takedown here, but there is literally nothing I could do. Yet again, it's a scripted situation where you have to use a takedown to get out of the vent and continue on with the story. Luckily though, I only have to use one takedown here. Instead of manually using a second fear takedown on the Arkham Knight, I just waited for the fear takedown to end and Batman automatically triggered the cutscene. No, this doesn't count as a takedown because I never pressed anything. So I took out the rest of the thugs in this room by almost purely punching, destroyed the missile launcher, and then headed off to this run's worst nightmare, the movie studios. Why is this area such an absolute nightmare? Because literally every single aspect of this section in the game involves takedowns. We start off with an outside Predator map with 11 enemies, including a minigunner. Luckily for me, I just unlocked the voice synthesizer. This made it really easy for me to lure thugs away from their buddies so I could take them out while they were alone, whether it be by gadgets or just punching. I took out a few thugs like that, then threw my smoke bomb at a large group of enemies to try and take them all out. I tried to punch, but I accidentally used a fear takedown. I restarted my game, and the Predator map resetted with only 6 enemies instead of 11? I have no idea, but taking out 6 enemies with all my gadgets at full charge again was a cakewalk. Now we head inside and run into a few combat fights with Robin. Again, all I have to do is not change characters in these duel fights and I'm good. After the combat fights, I was faced with a minigunner blocking my path through this hallway. Here we go again, another situation where the game takes away 90% of your moveset and forces you to follow another tutorial. You literally can't do anything except what the game wants you to do here. You can't charge the minigunner or use your gadgets, leaving grappling as your only option. Once you grapple up, you can't do anything but swing to the other gargoyles and get behind the minigunner. And yes, once you're behind him, the only thing you can do is use a takedown. Not all hope was lost though, because I still had an idea. What if I was able to make it through this hallway without triggering the cutscene? I tried using my line launcher to skip through, but Batman just jumped right off and triggered the cutscene despite my best efforts. I also tried another idea, which was throwing my smoke bomb and then triggering the cutscene immediately after. It appears that my smoke doesn't affect this minigunner in the slightest, and I got shot a bunch of times. I also tried messing around with other things in my moveset, but to be expected, nothing worked. Also, if you use a remote-controlled batarang, you can see that there isn't even a thug here, which means the minigunner seems to appear out of thin air. So, moving on, now it's the Christina Bell Predator map in the Haunted House set. This stealth section has a lot of minigunner enemies. This would be easy in a normal run, because you can just call your teammate anywhere, anytime, for an instant takedown. Without that luxury, I had to take a different approach. Thankfully, the environment is very big, meaning separated enemies were easy beatdowns for me. I would place explosive gel on the floor right after taking out an enemy, so when the thug comes over to check out what happened, I would get another free kill. Between the 3 minigunners, I took out one by using the disruptor, and then the other 2 by using beatdowns. So I was able to capture Christina Bell, leaving 2 more jokers. Also, I have no idea what happened here, but it was funny. Next up is Johnny Charisma. Disarming the bombs is easy, leaving just the bomb vest he's wearing. And unfortunately, you do have to use a takedown in this scenario. I tried literally everything else in my arsenal, but all of them resulted in an automatic cutscene and restarted the mission. That means we have to add another takedown to the counter, meaning we're already at 7. The last and final Joker was Albert King. The only way to damage him is to use a dual takedown with Robin. Yes, I do know that there's an out of bounds glitch you can use to take out King without using takedowns. I have stated before that I allow minor glitches, however I've never actually used any glitches in my runs before. I've always eliminated takedowns through strategy and determination, and always played within the rules of the game. I've gone back and forth on this topic, but for now I'm going to say I can't use glitches or skips to eliminate takedowns. With that said, I was still going to try and beat him without using takedowns. I sat there for so long, just punching and punching until something happened. Something did in fact happen. Albert completely glitched out and didn't move or attack, which also meant he couldn't revive any of the other thugs. I know I was just talking about not using glitches, but this was completely unintentional. This gave me plenty of time to experiment with my moveset to see if I could damage King without using takedowns, but sadly nothing worked. I wasn't able to remove any takedowns, but I felt better knowing I had tried everything. So I had to use 5 team takedowns to finish the boss fight, which brings the counter up to 12. Bet you thought this area was over, right? I did too, but it's most certainly not. To get back to the main room, you first have to take out these enemies. That means you have to use the voice synthesizer to get the thugs to open the gate, which you can only do when you're inside of these grates. Then, Harley comes out, and guess what? The only way to get out of these grates is to use, yes, another takedown. That's now 13 takedowns, which is more than double of all my other runs combined. Now that the movie studio's nightmare is finally over, I could move on to the next section of the game, which was the Cloudburst. There was one Predator map on Stag airships, but I easily cleared it using my gadgets. Other than that, the rest of the section is pretty much all Batmobile. As I said earlier, the Batmobile has no significance in this run at all, which means I'm just gonna skip right on through to the Arkham Knight's headquarters. This section doesn't have much fighting at the beginning, it's mainly just going through a maze while trying to get to Gordon. With that said, there was one combat encounter worth mentioning. That's this area, where there's a lot of militia all gathered together, including one with a bomb vest. Now, unlike the last dude wearing explosives, this prompt only says to disarm him. I don't know if I should be mad at the inconsistency on Rocksteady's part, but I'm just glad I didn't have to use another takedown. I then cleared the rest of the thugs, and that was that. Moving through the rest of the headquarters, I didn't run into anything worth mentioning until the Arkham Knight boss fight. This is a 4-stage Predator map with the inclusion of a boss. Stage 1 was no different than a normal playthrough, you just sneak under Jason's gargoyle and grapple up. The second stage adds our militia into the fight. I was able to take out most of the enemies with my remote hacking device, then used my beatdowns to take out the remaining enemies. Then on to stage 3, which adds enemies with optic deflection armor. For the most part, I just took out enemies that were all by themselves to lure in other enemies, then would take out all those thugs with explosive gel or just by punching. Similar to stage 1, stage 4 doesn't have any militia. That means all I have to do is sneak up on Jason, then grapple onto his gargoyle, and then the fight's over. After beating Jason, Scarecrow gets away again, and my next mission is to save the data at the clock tower from the militia. By this point in the run, I was practically an expert at Predator without using takedowns. I first hacked the drone to take out 3 enemies, including the minigunner. Next, I exploded this weak wall to take out 2 more enemies. Then, I disrupted this weapons crate to take out another thug, leaving the remaining enemies to be taken out by explosive gel or punches. Also, I had a cool moment on the last thug. He somehow spotted me, but I quickly pulled out my disruptor and jammed his gun right before he could shoot me. I then glide kicked him and completely snapped his spine in half. The next section is saving GCPD from the militia, which really doesn't involve takedowns. There was some combat fights, but not any really worth mentioning, so I'm gonna skip right on to the finale of the game. Now, I was thinking the run was over at this point, and that's where I was sadly mistaken. First up is the battle with Joker in Crime Alley. I sat here for so long, fighting the swarm of Jokers, trying to avoid using takedowns. But I unfortunately found out that the only way to forward the story is to use the Joker takedowns. An infinite amount of Jokers will just keep spawning until you kill multiple Jokers. And guess what? It takes a whopping 8 takedowns to finally forward the story, which means the takedown counter is at 21 now. And we're not done yet. Later in the finale, when Batman and Joker fight head to head one last time, you have to use an environmental takedown to lock Joker up in the cell. After that, the game is over and the run comes to an end. Thankfully, it's finally over. That was one of the most painful challenges I've ever attempted. So it takes a massive 22 takedowns to beat Arkham Knight. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more of my Batman Arkham challenges, and of course thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.